Welcome back to the Constitutional Clarion. Today I thought I would talk to you a little bit about the background to the yes-no pamphlet to a referendum. Now this is looking at the history of it, not this particular referendum pamphlet, because I'm recording this before that pamphlet's been released. I thought it was probably good to give you a little bit of context to place that pamphlet in. So the idea here was it was introduced after some referendums that were held in 1911 had failed. Now, those referendums dealt with the expansion of Commonwealth power in relation to trade and commerce, industrial relations, corporations, trusts and monopolies. And the Commonwealth was quite miffed that the people had voted against them and thought, well look, maybe the reason for that is that the people were just not sufficiently informed to feel that they could make a genuine vote to change the Constitution. So the idea was if we give them information so that they can make an informed vote, they might be more inclined to vote positively in a referendum. Now even Alfred Deakin, who had opposed the referendum, did support the idea of this extra education. He said that it was the duty of politicians to give the very best information they could to voters so that voters could give an informed vote in a referendum. Remembering, by the way, that Alfred Deakin was one of the people who had proposed quite radically at the time that the Constitution should be amended by the people in a referendum. So he had quite a vested interest in making sure that this system that he had originally proposed actually worked by ensuring the people were properly informed. Now, the Attorney General of the day, Billy Hughes, had the rather naive view that this information that should be sent to voters should be sent from the politicians themselves. So the idea was that there would be a formal yes case that was written by the politicians who had voted yes in Parliament, and a no case by those politicians in Parliament who had voted against the referendum, if there were any. And this is what he said about what he expected those politicians to do. He said that he thought members of Parliament would put the case in an impersonal, reasonable and judicial way. He said no imputations of motives would be made and that arguments would appeal to reason rather than emotions and party sentiments. Well, how much do you think that happened? So I went back and had a look at the first yes-no pamphlet that was written in relation to referendums that were then held in 1913. And guess what those referendums were intended to do? Oh yes, same thing, expand Commonwealth powers in relation to trade and commerce and corporations and industrial relations and monopolies and trusts and combines and all those sorts of things. The yes case, for example, said that trusts and combines are the greatest threat to modern civilization because they crush competition and exploit the people. The no case said that if the referendum succeeded, it would produce a mongrel constitution that was unworkable and would result in unification rather than federation. Now you can see from those types of statements that were they really just directed at informing and reason, or were they emotional and manipulative, etc., etc.? Yeah, they were. So the problem here was that the referendum pamphlet themselves were complete failures in terms of being able to inform the people, and of course the referendum itself also failed. In my view, probably rightly so anyway. But even when you get a referendum that actually should have succeeded, the yes-no case could really undermine it. So let me give you one other example. 1937, referendum to give the Commonwealth power to make laws with respect to aviation. Now, if anything is something that should be done nationally, it is aviation, because planes fly across state borders and you can't have different rules in relation to where the plane is flying because, you know, they might all crash when they cross the border if they're all on different levels. So you really need some kind of integrated, sensible system for aviation. But when this referendum was held, even though it had bipartisan support, there was still a no case And the people proposing no came out with the most outrageous and ridiculous statements. So they said, oh, look, if the Commonwealth has power to make laws with respect to aviation, that's going to destroy the railways. It's going to make all the railway workers unemployed. That will be the destruction of all the country towns. The prices of food will skyrocket because of the huge freight costs. And the finance of every state would be in danger. Now, the referendum failed. However, the Commonwealth did, as you're probably aware, find other ways, constitutionally valid ways of legislating with respect to aviation. And by the way, none of those things that the no case claimed actually came about. So yes and no cases, so both sides do tend to be manipulative, do tend to have arguments in them that are speculative and frankly in many cases absurd, and can effectively frighten people into voting against a referendum, even when the proposal in the referendum is of itself perfectly sensible. So that's what's happened in the past. And for those reasons, prior to this referendum, the government initially proposed to just get rid of the yes-no case because it was so ineffective at properly informing people, and it was used in a manipulative way. However, in the legislation that was going to do that, as it was passing through Parliament, the government ended up having to compromise with the opposition, and one of the aspects of compromise was to restore the yes-no case. And so we will see what the yes-no case says. Hopefully it is informative. And I do encourage people to read it, but all I'd say is, given the history behind the yes-no case in the past, I'd say read it with a grain of salt. I'd say read it critically, look at the wording, what's there that's trying to manipulate you emotionally, where is the missing facts from it. Has it properly informed you, or do you need to look to other sources to be properly informed? So keep your critical wits about you when you read the yes-no case. I'll be reading it too. As I said, I haven't seen it yet because I've recorded this before the yes-no case has come out. But as a means of properly educating people before a referendum, frankly, it's, in the past at least, not been very good. So keep your critical eyes open. Thank you very much for watching the Constitutional Clarion, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.